The mustache is
Always ready.
Oh, the mustache is always ready.
That's right. This is the big debut, first webinar with the
This is
mustache,
it, the big debut.
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm definitely gonna play that up.
I'm honored to be part of this big debut. I am.
I am too. All right, let's start the. I'm going to turn on the start the webinar, and then people are going to start coming in, and then we're going to go to the
Cool.
live stream. All right, let's see. We're going to turn that on. We're going to turn this on. Looks like we're starting to get some people in the room. I apologize. We're starting a minute late today. I'm a little bit behind, and I have to be honest with you. I have David Campbell with me, and he's sporting a brand new, debuting for the first time, his mustache, and that's what's throwing off my internal clock today. So we're a minute behind because I'm just in awe of the stash. Straight up Magnum PI, bro. I love it. I absolutely love it. You just need a Hawaiian shirt and a Ferrari 308 Testarossa, and you're good to go.
I mean, I think that would fit pretty nicely with the Tropic brand, if I'm being honest. So
that's a soft. I just threw that to you. I mean, that's like right down the middle.
Perfect layup. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect layup for the Tropic brand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. So as I'm going through, Tina, as always, is in the control room, making sure we're all set here. I just clicked on the live stream engine to make sure that we're live streaming on LinkedIn Live. Tina, are we live streaming at the moment?
We are.
Awesome. So that means that this is how this works. I'll do some basic housekeeping. There are exit ramps on different rows. We are live streaming this live. We have a live studio audience of attendees. By all means, everyone who is live and in the studio audience here, which is the attendees, I monitor the chat. I ask questions in the chat. We love this to be interactive, but we're also live streaming on LinkedIn. So if you are watching us on LinkedIn and you do want to ask a question to David or I, or introduce a topic, by all means, feel free to introduce it on LinkedIn. Tina will revert that back to us. If you feel the need to actually use all the tools and buttons of Zoom, by all means, feel free to go down to the bottom and hit the Q&A button and ask a Q&A. I'll try and keep an eye on that as well, although I mostly work in the chat, and that's the case. Last thing I'll say is this. David and I have known each other a while now. We're very, very comfortable with this, and we love interactivity, man. So if you've got questions, thoughts, ideas, good things, bad things, I don't really care. I just want you to throw them at us as we go. So that said, David from Tropic, Dave, thank you very much for being here. For those of you who don't know, Tropic is a community partner of Procurement Foundry and has been for a while. I love Dave. When I met him, it was very simple. It was like, dude, man, I love what you're doing. I just want to be a part of it. How do we get involved? Which was the easiest negotiation we've had. So thank you, David. Really appreciate that. Dave, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Tell us a little bit about Tropic, a little bit about what your roles and responsibilities are, and then what the company does, and then we can jump into today's topic, which is this emerging market of third-party SaaS management and buyer platforms like yourself.
Yeah, happy to. Great to sit down with you, Mike. We obviously are huge fans of Procurement Foundry, and
thanks,
to echo what of course, and similar reaction when I saw what you guys were doing. Felt very much like kindred spirits and wanted to get involved. So to that point, to echo what Mike said, like I love when these turn into more freestyle type conversations. If there are questions that you guys have, just kind of fire them off, and we can take this conversation in any direction that's going to be valuable for you guys in the community. So that's really what this is all about. I am the CEO and co-founder of Tropic. Tropic is a software purchasing solution that basically the vision of our platform is that software is a very difficult commodity to buy, to research, to manage, to control in every aspect. And Tropic is an all-in-one place solution for SaaS. We're a system of record where you can do all the things that you need to do with software, whether it's buying them, buying the tools, managing the tools, learning more about the tools in one place. And as we'll talk about today, we have a human element to what we do, which is facilitating with the purchasing of software where there's particularly high volume and leveraging industry expertise. And to give a little bit of kind of insight into why this concept initially made sense to me when I was thinking about what an opportunity could be in the market, we'll double click on this more in a moment. When I was on the sales side as a VP of sales at a marketing technology company, we had a highly refined sales engine. And I realized that these people that we have on this team have this vast ecosystem of tools and data. They have Salesforce as a system of record. They have Zoom Info with data on you, the buyer, which is how if you get cold calls, they got that from Zoom Info. Great tool, actually, but unbridled data. And most importantly of all, they have the ability to do the same pitch and go through the same motion hundreds of times per year. So in going through the same sales pitch hundreds of times per year, they're going to learn every single objection that you have as the buyer. They're going to learn every pitfall in the process, and they're going to iterate and optimize that experience accordingly. And the buyer, you're buying Microsoft once every 3 years. You're buying Salesforce once every year, maybe once every 2 years. You don't have the same repetitions to build that same refinement of process that they have on the sales side. And Tropic was basically born from a simple question, which is, what if you could? What if you did have those repetitions? And that's what the combination of our platform and our people is designed to do.
Yeah, I love the concept, right? It's basically, hey, you get a designated hitter that only gets up to bat once or twice a night, versus if he gets up to bat, 9 times a day, he's liable to get out of a slump, right?
Exactly.
I love the side that you're saying that you came from the other side of the table where they've got literally hundreds and hundreds of times they're going through the same thing so they can tweak it. Whereas with you, even if you're buying hundreds and hundreds of different titles of software, the people on the other end of what you're buying from a software perspective, they might be modeling it differently. They might be selling it different. It's got different, deliverables to the end users. You've got different stakeholders involved. Some of them have taken your stakeholders out for dinners. Some of them haven't.
Mets games.
Some of them, Mets games / Vail condos. I've seen and heard it all. So, let's think. And by the way, thank you for the introduction to yourself and the company and a little bit about your background. I think your background fits absolutely perfectly into your space and what you're providing, which is, hey, I used to sit on the other side of the table. I know all of the Jedi mind tricks that go into that, right? And I often say, the procurement side and the sales side are opposite sides of kind of the same coin. People ask me all the time whether or not those qualities and qualifications are interchangeable, and I'm like, I think procurement people could make great salespeople because of their attention to detail and their drive and ambition. I don't know if salespeople could be great procurement people because they don't have the fight. They tend to blow money like salespeople do. But anyway, so let's just open this. Let's crack this thing wide open. I'd love to throw a spotlight on the elephant in the room here. Existing procurement shops, we know, we love, we run, we operate. They are running out of bandwidth, right? I mean, there's just at some point in time here across the last 3 to 4 years, literally everything became a tech sourcing exercise. I mean, literally everything has the IoT. I mean, what used to be, a lock on a door now has an IoT, and it now that it has an IP address, it's become a technology buy. And because of that, not only the technology spend category, but the SaaS category has just exploded, right? And there's just not enough people that have enough experience buying technology in SaaS. Is that why we're talking today about the rise of the third-party SaaS buyer? Is that what's happening here?
I think so, yeah. So this is, the third-party SaaS buyer is definitely an emerging category. There are new players popping up left and right in this category. And, we can talk about navigating this category as a procurement professional in a moment. But before we get into that, why is this a thing? I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, when I look at our customer base, companies like Zapier, like DocuSign, like Qualtrics, companies that are buying a lot of software, they're buying, not only is it a lot of software, but it's way more software than they've ever had to buy historically. We're actually seeing 50% more that cloud SaaS spend in just the last couple of years on this customer segment, and software is going nowhere but up. And what's interesting about software as a commodity is procurement's job is, in essence, I think, harder than ever because, we talked about the analogy of the sales team that's refining their process. They all want you to follow their sales process, and they have boxes that they need to check in Salesforce to advance you from one stage to the next, which means the expectation from the vendor side is that a procurement manager or an IT sourcing professional is going to follow 100 different processes to buy 100 different tools, right? Which we all know is not viable. And the expectation is, from the stakeholder side, also higher than ever, that you're going to know everything about this tool that you have to buy. They're going to be versed in the licensing mechanisms that they use, the pricing that they have available. And it's by no means the procurement professional's fault because there's 200 new companies raising Series A, Series B rounds of funding probably this week somewhere, that someone in the engineering department is going to take out a credit card and buy in the near future. So just the sheer volume of SaaS, it's been a pre-Cambrian explosion of SaaS, I think, is fundamentally changing the mandate of the procurement function. And I think on a long enough time horizon, every business is a software business. Software is going nowhere but up. So I think that we need to start rethinking our strategies for buying and managing this category, because, you know, just in the last couple of years, it's a completely different universe.
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting about it is you almost have to start thinking about your buying strategy before you even buy it now, which is crazy to think of. Because like you said, there's 200 companies getting Series A funding right now across 20 different categories of operations, right? Or 25 different ways in which a company operates. And there's probably 200 companies getting Series A funding in each one of those categories. There's 200 facilities management companies. There's 200 applicant tracking system companies. God knows there's at least 200 MarTech companies right now. There's probably 2,000 MarTech companies getting Series A funding. And then there's, I mean, just in our category alone, there's probably 200 biotech companies that are getting Series A funding just for companies that sell software to procurement departments to operate procurement, right? Whether
100%.
Spend analytics or supply chain operations management, or I don't know, warehouse, God forbid, warehousing or trucking or IoT or whatever. So I think it's really interesting that the explosion is there, but at the same time, the models are shifting too. I meet people every day inside of Procurement Foundry, and they're like, "Oh, this one's, you know, this one's a business to consumer model that's trying to get into corporate world. This one is I heard this for the first time a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't stopped using it, which is prosumer, right? Professional consumers. That it's kind of like, oh, I've got all these marketing people now, and they're coming to, they have their own subscriptions to Sprinkler for social listening or all these other things. So that's a prosumer model. Right. And then there's the enterprise model, which is just really cloudy and ugly, right? It's like, oh, we used to buy perpetual licenses. I'm shocked at how many perpetual license software packages still out there, to be honest with you. And then there's the SaaS model, which you talked about, which is just exploding. And then there's the professional services and the upkeep and the maintenance side of the softwares. Like, oh, okay. Somebody who started a conversation this week inside of Procurement Foundry around the fact that Premier support inside of Microsoft is starting to change.
Right, exactly.
So not only are you buying a SaaS product, but you're buying support on a SaaS product, which the SaaS product, the support is its own SaaS product that's supporting a SaaS product. And I'm like, oh, for the love of God, right? I mean, you're gonna go blind on a whiteboard trying to draw this thing out. So as I mentioned, I think it's a bandwidth thing. I think that the emergence of the rise of the third party, which makes me kind of think Star Wars, bro. I got to be honest with you. I read the title on this thing and I was like, okay, I think Lucasfilms is going to sue me for this. The rise of the third party SaaS buyers. Obviously, we have been building SaaS buyers and technology sourcing professionals inside of our internal organization for a while now. And it's just getting to the point where it's like, all right, listen, if I'm a CPO now, I'm throwing my hands up in the air. And I'm like, all right, I don't really have a choice. There's this new market out there. They're covering more ground faster and more intelligently than I can. I can't find help. We're in a bidding war with everybody who actually knows the products that I need. And my end users are upset that I can't fill the void fast enough. So I don't have a choice. I have to augment, right? I have to augment what I'm running. So, I mean, is that what you're hearing from your clientele? I'm sure you're hearing from some clientele like, oh my God, I've got this organization and I can't keep up. And then you must have some other people like what we call the lone wolves, the emerging hypergrowths, things like that. They're like, I'm not even going to start. I'm going to go straight to third-party outsource.
Yeah, so those are basically the two cohorts that we see. The problem in all cases is the same. We have way too many SaaS contracts. And what we find is for those companies that do have more robust procurement functions, those procurement functions, their time is significantly better spent on, you know, the fat head of spend, the spend that we all know and understand and that we have playbooks for, the Microsoft, the Salesforce, the Oracle, the Adobe, right? The companies that you can pay a Gartner or pay an ISG to come in and help you with, and you know they're going to be extremely time consuming. The trends that we've seen though are that the long tail, the death by 1,000 paper cuts of SaaS vendors are increasingly eating into the fat head. And Gartner doesn't know anything about those tools, and you generally don't have time for them, right? And this is where we'll see spend thresholds get implemented, or spend thresholds even get increased as the spend is growing. There's actually a big strategic long-term savings opportunity in that tail, because SaaS vendors have a habit of growing explosively, right? So to give you like an example, nothing against Snowflake. Snowflake is one of these suppliers though, right? Where, you kind of get your toe wet with Snowflake. Once you're using Snowflake, much like a Salesforce, you're not going anywhere else. It's the one that you're going to use. And a contract that costs you $5,000 one year can cost you $1 million the next year. And, so what do you do with that, right? Because at most companies, that $5,000 purchase is probably going to fly under the radar. It's probably not going to get the InfoSec treatment that it needs up front. It's probably not going to have, rate protection negotiated into it and pricing tiers negotiated into it, because it looks like such a small purchase. But we at Tropic know that that's a snowball that can explode into something really large. And I think that that's very unique to SaaS. So if you want to get your arms around that, we believe that a third party is essential for some subset of it. The other thing that is advantageous about working with a third party, I was actually just talking to New York Life there in the office this morning, and Q4 is coming up. As we all know, Q4 is going to be insane. And what's nice about working with a third party is you're buying something fractional that is there when you need it, and it's not the cost of, generally speaking, a full-time employee. But you might need to throw 50 people at the onslaught of pipeline that's coming at you in Q4 on a moment's notice, right? And you don't have the ability to kind of flex up and down with internal resources that way. And that's something that third-party SaaS buyers can offer, so that you're able to get full coverage, every contract, compliantly processed, negotiated, and everything else. So I think those are, it's about bandwidth, and then it's also about flexibility in a lot of cases.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a question about whether or not this is a situation that you're seeing clients come down market, or for me, which is down the buy stack, right? Which is, the big head versus the tail spend side of the stack. But before I go there, and I think you hit the nail on the head, which is, yes, this is what that is I love the fact that you use the analogy of Snowflake, and I've had 3 conversations about Snowflake in the last 4 days. It's just weird. All of a sudden, everybody and their cousin's talking about this. I think that's because last year and the year before that, people were buying the $5,000 and $10,000 Snowflake engagements, and now all of a sudden they're like, "Holy crap, we're spending $300,000 on Snowflake this year. What the hell happened?" Kind of like Azure from a few years ago.
Yep.
Anyway, point is, you mentioned that at $5,000, it's probably not getting the info security evaluation that it needs. One of the things I think is interesting about this, the software stack, and this used to be in the hardware and the appliance world, was proofs of concept, right? I mean, this was just something people did. Cisco would come out with a new box, or somebody would come out with a new edge side appliance or something like that, and they just slap it in your data center and go, no, just give it a whirl for 90 days and see how it works. And if you like it, then we can talk about you buying it, right? By 90 days, it's part of your infrastructure, and you don't have a choice. You have to buy it, because now it's routing 3/4 of your routing tables and doing info security audits against your routing tables. Is that the same kind of, is that tactic now being used inside of the SaaS space too, where, hey, you have to start thinking about actually acquiring and negotiating in your purchasing strategy against SaaS when it's in proof of concept? Because again, you said, and I completely agree with you, there are thousands of Series A startups that are willing to give you what I call the early adopter, or the guinea pig price, right? Which is like, well, shit, at a few $100 or $1,000 or $5,000, who cares about it? You know what I mean? It's like, okay, it's behind everybody's threshold for should we care about this, other than maybe if it's hooking into our HR system of record or our ERP system, right? So, but is this something that procurement folks and chief procurement officers who are thinking about engaging a third-party SaaS buyer like yourself, is this something people need to be worried about? Which is, hey man, I need to bring these people in at the beginning, maybe even before there's an invoice, when there's a proof of concept.
Yeah, so I think 2 things are happening. Well, technically 3. We still have your bread and butter POCs that we're all used to. Microsoft will always POC the new feature, and then eventually like find a way into selling you into it. The other 2 though are a little bit more nuanced and very, very SaaS specific. One is very simply just land and expand, right? Like get a couple seats of people using it, get a couple, units of consumption happening, these consumption-based agreements like Snowflake, like Datadog, like Fivetran, those types of agreements are very slippery in that sense. And then the what happens with those, and then the last one is a contract for something like, to your point, at a business that's relatively new, that's figuring out pricing, but has something that they know is very sticky. All three of those create significant leverage for the supplier on year two. And on year two, you wind up really kind of locked in because the functionality is getting embraced and adopted, and the rates weren't, there's no protection negotiated long-term into those agreements. So I think that there's value in bringing a third-party buyer early for two reasons. One is to create that protection when these contracts are at a size and volume that is not a good resource allocation for your senior procurement resources, but that the downside effect will be meaningful from not getting, risk mitigation into these agreements. That's a great place to bring in the third-party buyer. And then two, another great place is like, what does the stack look like, right? And one of the advantages, I think, to working with someone in our category is we see for hundreds of customers every single tool that every company like you is using. We know what those tools cost. We know what the common alternatives are. We know how they license. And when it comes time to buy your first product analytics tool or to make a move in a technology category that you may not have experience with, we know with a pretty high level of certainty what it is that you need, right? Because we've seen it so many times. And that, from a planning perspective, not only from a budgetary planning perspective, but also from a functionality perspective of like, do we have the tools in our environment that our company needs? Those, I think, are good applications for bringing us in early, especially in cases where they're a contract that you should really be proactive on, even if they feel small.
Okay, so a couple of things. And it looks like LinkedIn is bumping right now because we're getting a lot from Tina in the chat around what's going on in LinkedIn. One of the comments was around strikes me that Topic is not just about procurement flex, but also about legal and infosec. And other things, which is, and this is how I feel about this third-party SaaS buyer world, which is, and I've been saying this for a long time, there's aggregators of knowledge that are in the marketplace and that are emerging in the marketplace right now that you can't replicate inside of your procurement organization, no matter how much you try, right? And I used to use this example. I hired, back when I was at Publicis Group, my team and I hired one of the most intelligent telecommunications guys I've ever met. Quite candidly, I stole him from AT&T Wireless. Let's just, I'll put myself on the record as saying I hijacked some guy out of AT&T Wireless. Brilliant guy in hardware and knew every single nuance of, how to create a contract, how to create a corporate environment, and what the rate cards were all about, and international versus non-international, all that. But again, his scope, even though it was Publicis Group and it was massive, right? I had 13,000 cell phones, which was huge, bigger than anybody I knew. It was still just my 13,000 phones. And he didn't get to see, he was great at account and spend management, but when it came time for contracts, we were always like looking for benchmark, right? And this is the benefit, this is one of the benefits that comes with this, which is, as this gentleman says out on LinkedIn, that Tropic is just about, it's about procurement flex, but also about legal and infosec and a lot of other emerging, right? So my question was going to be, what are some of the benefits of deploying a strategy like bringing in a third-party SaaS buyer? I think the answer is, and you can answer that, and I think this gentleman on LinkedIn is pointing to it, which is the aggregation of knowledge, and you started to hit on that, is one of the keys of the success, right? Which is, you kind of, by default, you're doing automated benchmarking, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's about leveraging the data that the network can provide, right? So every time a new customer comes and joins Tropic, Tropic is becoming valuable for everybody that uses Tropic, right? And to the point raised in the chat by Sanjay, totally agree. Cost savings are just the tip of the iceberg. Cost savings are very important, obviously, but cost savings this year are almost not as important as cost savings for the next 3 years if we're avoiding, $5-10 million in costs on a ballooning SaaS contract. And the way that we do that is we see the structures that set companies up for success. What is the order of operations for buying SaaS? Who needs to get involved in buying SaaS? When do you need to collect InfoSec at the beginning versus the end? Things like that, right? And without fail, every customer that we work with, when they buy SaaS, they have InfoSec, they have legal, they have finance, they have the stakeholder, they might have, extra procurement sub functions that have to get involved. And some of the challenges that those companies face beyond the cost savings are, people don't want to follow this process. When somebody in marketing wants to buy something, they don't want to project manage through 10 hoops. They're not bringing procurement in early enough. They just want to buy something, and that leads to rogue purchasing, right? So one of the advantages that we offer in this category, not trying to hard sell Tropic, but to react to the statement that was made, is automating those workflows on the platform so that that stakeholder can go to a portal, select the thing that they want to buy, submit it, and then the platform can run the rest of that process. That's a lot of the bottlenecks that we see and a lot of the pain points that we hear about. Overspend, definitely, but it's also like, how do I collaborate better with stakeholders? How do I get stakeholders to adopt a process? How do I ensure that we're going through all the proper checks and balances? And I think that that's all part of SaaS buying, right? It's not just the negotiation piece. So I think that that's an astute call out. And that's something that we're very focused on automating.
Yeah. Francis says, I want to know the future of procurement professionals with SaaS. I think we can jump into that.
Mm-hmm.
Francis, I'm going to put a pin in that for a second because I've got some ideas about where I think that's going. I think it's a shift away from tactical, hey, I just got a whole bunch, to a lot more strategic on the types of solutions and what they offer. I think you become an advisor with somebody behind you, similar to a David with Tropic or one of the others in the marketplace. But at the same time, you're leveraging somebody who's got the subject matter expertise and the bandwidth to be able to handle the ever-growing stack of SaaS that you have, while you become a strategic advisor to the marketplace, to your internal stakeholders. I think that's the future of SaaS procurement people, which is, and again, I think it's, I've been preaching this for a long time. There is a wave of technology and third-party services coming to the marketplace right now, just because of the magnitude of what we're all trying to handle. You need to, and I think most existing procurement people are going to need to level up from the tactical aspects of what they used to do, outsourcing some of the tactical, because there's further visibility in the marketplace, as Dave has been describing, and you become much more of a strategic element on where they're going. You want to be looking out with your stakeholders 6 to 12 months and being engaged in those conversations as to, oh, I just have something I have to renew. So that's kind of my take on where I think the future of that's going.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to hold that, but I just ranted on it, so I'm gonna let it ride. Tell me a little bit about the competitiveness of the marketplace and differential. Tell me about your stack.
Mm-hmm.
I try to keep these things TED Talk style-y and not salesy, but I'm interested in the tech stack behind some of this stuff now, because it's not all just, hey, I got a bunch of guys in the back room and we're all buying Snowflake this week, so we have a Snowflake expert.
Mm-hmm.
There is a technology stack, as you mentioned, behind that. I'm interested in what's happening in that tech stack right now. And what are some of the things that you're providing to the clientele that is most valuable? Is it, hey, yeah, we're doing benchmarking and saving money, but we're also helping on things like liability and raising liability and payment terms and cash flow management, mm-hmm. and planning and potentially even merger and acquisition stuff when we get other information in from a new acquisition, and we can compare the two against each other. So helping out in M&A associated with SaaS stack, if you will. I almost said Sasquatch, but SaaS stack, right? So let's talk a little bit about the tech stack. Let's talk about what's some of the most valuable things, and what is your competitive differential? Because, like you mentioned earlier, you're not the only guy that does this in this space. Yep. I'm sure you have your own secret sauce, but what is all that?
Yeah, definitely. So in terms of the technology that we provide that our customers are benefiting from, really, I would think of it as like the procurement system of record, right? For SaaS, and that's one thing I want to be very clear on for the audience, is we are hyper focused on software. We believe that to create real value as a third party, you need to be hyper focused in nature, which, to kind of harken back to the point that we just talked about, what is the future of the internal procurement professional? I think you hit the nail on the head, Mike. It's like the internal procurement professional starts to orchestrate the full strategy of the tech stack. And our vision for the future, the procurement professional is the smartest person in every room on every software tool. And as a consequence, they have visibility into what the stack should look like, and they can advise on things like that for the stakeholder that needs to buy it. And then when it comes to just grind contracts, that's when you can outsource. and have somebody that, is just going to pick up the phone over and over again and talk to vendors. And that's sort of how we see this unfolding. So in order to do that, we have to empower that procurement professional, which we do with our technology. The first thing that I think is creating value is we're helping drive meaningful stakeholder adoption. Stakeholders like to buy things on their phones. They like to buy things in 2 seconds. As I've talked about a lot, like a lot of modern procurement professionals now are millennials for the first time. We're in our 40s now, and we've kind of risen into the spot of buying things. And we have totally different expectations for how to buy things than software and technology has ever been bought before. So we create an experience that's very, very easy for stakeholders to find the things they need and select and buy them. And then we automate the rest of the process to ensure that compliance is there. So that workflow automation is one of the key value propositions for us. And what it's driving is it's driving compliance in the purchasing process, making sure that every set of eyes is on every purchase at every level that needs them. The second thing that we're doing that's creating value is, okay, you bought it. Now, how do you get value out of it? And we are integrated with hundreds of different solutions so that we can measure the utilization of those tools that you bought on the same platform that you used to buy them. And we can show you how your license utilization looks against your licensing position. What are we paying for? What are we using? Is there a delta there? And if so, rinse and repeat, dispatch the team to go renegotiate this contract for me, right? So we bring a lot of different things kind of into one workflow. And I think that is at once the strength of the product offering and our differentiation. We have the most, wide-ranging procurement platform when it comes to SaaS specifically. You can go buy a point solution for SaaS management. You can buy a point solution for workflow automation, and you can use tools to research SaaS providers. But doing all of those in one place is something that only we're doing. And the last point that I would say about the value creation, like data is currency in this category. Data is what makes a third party special. And it needs to be recent data because vendors are changing their terms all the time. New products are coming out all the time. Price points are changing all the time. I remember, I went toe to toe with ISG a couple of times when I was at Microsoft, and they would hire people from licensing in Microsoft. And if that person was more than a year out of Microsoft, they didn't know the licensing anymore, right? So
Right.
that data is really key. So we see all of that data constantly because every transaction is happening through our system, and that feeds our research product. So you can always see what is the latest pricing on all these tools, who's using these tools, is it trending up, is it trending down, can I talk to somebody else that's been through this process? Those are kind of the pillars of the stool that create value for us. And as I said, doing all those in one place is differentiated. And then I think probably the other major differentiator, this is not an outright knock at everyone else in the category, but everybody else that's in this category has kind of a different vision for where this is all heading. I believe that where this is all heading is buyer enablement. It's getting to a place where people that want to buy things have exactly the same enablement and data as the people that are selling things, kind of to the point that I raised at the beginning of this conversation, right? That means tooling, it means data and resources and people, and it's a complicated problem. We intend to solve it piece by piece. What others in the category are doing is they're actually using this initial platform as a demand gen tool for the supply side and striking, backdoor deals with suppliers where they're taking a cut of the deals that are coming through the platform that they're negotiating for you. To us, that's a conflict of interest and something that we would never do. We adhere to kind of our own supplier code of ethics and only represent the buy side, full stop. And that, is actually something that's very differentiated in this category.
Yeah, listen, I think we all have to make money as long as the clients, if that's what the clients agree to, that's what the clients agree to. If the clients agree to your model, their model, I'm not going to debate business models associated with how people make money. But I think what's really interesting is a lot of what you talked about as far as being able to create more intelligent decisions for your clientele based on the stack that you have and the fact that you're staying so laser focused on what you're doing, right?
Yep.
What I think is really interesting is what you talked about earlier, and then I want to talk a little bit about if you're seeing any emerging sectors or things like that. But I really like the idea of, hey, this thing started off as a third-party SaaS buyer thing, right? And it's still there. Don't get me wrong. I think it's still there. But I think what's really interesting is something that you hit on earlier, which was we're starting to get into that advisory role of, hey, we understand you want to buy an applicant tracking system. You have an applicant tracking system in-house. Here's what we're seeing as trends in the marketplace for applicant tracking systems against types of companies like yours, right?
Exactly.
Like, hey man, not everybody is, and I'm just using this as an example. I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. Please don't send me a cease and desist order. But the big, huge 800-pound gorilla in applicant tracking might not be the one that you want, because not everybody that's in that sector is buying that product, right? They're buying, there's some other emerging Series B, Series C players in this space now, like HiBob or things like that, that are amazing tools. They're 30 cents on the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar. They're aggressively buying market share, and our clientele are buying that and having success with that. And I think that's really interesting, because now you almost become a consultancy model against buying strategy. So you almost can, it's an improved version of the guys in Connecticut whose name I've sworn not to ever say again, in my opinion. I think if you could do some market research with your third-party SaaS providers, because everything is SaaS now, and I think you could save yourself a bunch of money off of some analysts who'd call you once a month. So I'm just saying that out loud.
Yeah, and actually, one thing I wanted to say on that, to Gloria's question, is it advisory? It is, but it's actually 100% automated, right? Like, this data is just being surfaced organically by what we choose to measure and how people use our system, right? So, like, if we see a sudden spike in new purchases for a tool, by the way, ATS Greenhouse is on fire right now. I know they're not a new tool, but big companies are buying Greenhouse. As I mentioned earlier, in terms of our supplier code of ethics, I'm not paid to say that. They're like taking off. And we can see that, right? And so we can see that, hey, big companies now are suddenly buying this tool that used to be a startup tool. There's some credibility here, and it's just getting surfaced organically, because I think the challenge that companies like Gartner face, companies like Forrester face, is that the way that they're collecting the data is from conversation by conversation, survey by survey. We're collecting data like from a fire hose, right? We see every single purchase naturally, first-party data collected from hundreds of providers across hundreds of customers. So it leads to a much richer data set that's being automatically generated by usage of the platform.
Yep. Yeah, I completely get that. Are you seeing any industry sectors that are popping? I mean, I know you just talked about applicant tracking systems and things like that. Is there a geography? Are you bound to the United States on this model? Are you the latest boy band in India? Is there a revenue size, like, hey, sub $1 billion is the sweet spot for the emergence of third-party SaaS buyers? Is there a level of maturity in procurement organizations that you seem to be always in? Like, tell me what you're seeing from the tea leaves.
Yeah, so first of all, this is a crazy time to be reading the tea leaves, because the rug got pulled out from under all of us like 6 months ago, and like SaaS tools that were like exploding have crashed since then. Tools that weren't doing much are taking off, right? Like, this category in particular is very much on the rise right now, because we're helping companies cut costs and extend their runway, which is a major focus for a lot of private companies right now. So it's all over the place. But I can say the areas that we're seeing increased investment, funny enough, one of the areas that's most fragmented is Office of the CFO procurement, this area that we're in, trying to solve the fragmentation problem. There's just so many different approaches. Like, is it a corporate card answer? Is it a procurement platform answer? Is it, just a workflow tool? Like, there's so many different ways of tackling this problem. I think that's creating a lot of confusion for buyers. HR tech is, a few years ago, MarTech was the most fragmented category under the sun. That famous slide came out of the Lumascape with like 10,000 vendors on it. That's now HR tech. That's now, buy tech, Office of the CFO type of technology. And then you have engineering tools. Like, engineering tools is an almost impenetrable category, because, kings are made in that category within a year, right? Like, it just happens so fast. So like, hard to get your arms around that.
I actually met one of those guys who sold a project, a piece of software that manages project management for building high-rise facility, like towers. And he was like, I built it, and 12 months later I sold it for like 40 million. And I'm like, I mean, there's just such a demand for project management of how the hell do I build a 70-story building in Manhattan? That this guy, it's just, you're absolutely right. There's these niches where all of a sudden somebody builds a piece of software and it's like, boom.
Exactly.
It just explodes.
So it's just like you snap your fingers and the tea leaves are changing. But
Yeah.
That's kind of, so the trend that we saw was fragmentation, hyper focus. Now what we're seeing just in the last couple of months is a mass consolidation, right? Because companies are now going line by line and seeing like, wait, how many project management tools do we have? We have to take out $10 million in expense from IT, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, we have Monday and Asana and all this crazy stuff. So they're looking to rationalize, and we're seeing, frankly, a tremendous amount of empowerment in the procurement function, right? Like, if you rewind the clock 1 year ago, and you have a company that has O365, which, as many of us know, offers Microsoft Teams for free, but the organization is using Slack for instant messaging. 2 years ago, 6 months ago, you never could have told them to turn off Slack. Slack is sacred. Now, nothing is sacred. Everyone is looking to consolidate anywhere we can. So the goal now, in a lot of cases for these procurement teams, is to know enough about these tools to know where is their overlap that we were unaware of, and where is their spend that we can cut, so we can rationalize our platform. So we saw this like meteoric rise of SaaS, the craziest year for venture investment last year that like ever, and then just as quickly a total crash and a complete 180 in the purchasing trend. So it's kind of a bucking bronco.
Is there one that stands out to you as, oh my God, it's been overbought? And is it collaboration in project management? Is it HR and benefits? Is it fintech? It can't possibly be biotech, because in my opinion, it's just not enough people buying biotech.
No.
I mean, the one for me that sticks out is probably MarTech, which is, I mean, like you said, the Lumascape, and everybody loves, and I love it too, the spider chart that Eloise put together associated with the industry. I mean, I'm thrilled that Procurement Foundry is on the spider chart. I don't know, other than the fact that we offer a community. So thank you for that, Eloise. But the MarTech Lumascape, which you made reference to, I mean, dude, that thing's been around for like 12 years now, right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I was in the marketing business when that thing came out, and there was like 1,200 names on the original one. Now there's literally like, it's so big they can't even fit it all in the Lumascape anymore. It's just an active database, right? And there's like 12,000 names, and there's like 1,200 email automation companies now in just that one sector, right? So for me, the one that I think is just ridiculously overbought, which is also a place where, I mean, you guys could make a living just if you just did that, right? If you just bought and I don't know how you're going to do this, because God bless them, the chief marketing officers are an animal on their own, right? But if you could just find a third-party SaaS buying partner like Dave and his company, and all they focused on was MarTech, I think it would be enough, right? I think it'd be enough. It's just, is there, in your opinion, in all these different buckets of spend, which one is just like, man, it's just out of control? Like,
well, so there's two kinds of out of control, right? One kind of out of control is we have 5 of them, right? And that's what I mean by out of control. Like, hey, I've got 7 financial planning and analysis tools right now, and my chief financial officer's new FP&A guy just asked me to buy an 8th, and I want to raise my hand and go, bro, we own 8 of these things. Like, pick one of them. That's definitely, so I think of project management. You see that all the time. Engineers live and die by Jira. Marketing team wants to use Monday. Ops team is in Reich, whatever. So there's always a lot of those, and that's a tough one to get out of, because people are so married to the one that they like, right? But they all do the same thing in essence. So that's definitely a big area. Collaboration tools, Zoom or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams, touching into Slack and instant messaging. That's a whole tangled web of like, they all have partial overlap, and you have to really kind of suss out what is the core capabilities that our end users need, and what is the minimum number of platforms and spend that can deliver those capabilities. But I actually think the worst offender in terms of pure dollars is those single standalone platforms that need you to commit to what you're going to consume up front. Cloud providers, AWS, GCP, right? Like, so many companies are under consuming their commits right now because they didn't have the sales they expected because of the market, and therefore not getting the product utilization they expected. And they're leaving a ton of credits on the shelf. Even if you've done a good job with your cloud, you may not be as diligent with Datadog, with Snowflake, with those other kind of infrastructural tools where you have to say, here's what I think we're going to need, right? Because all those tools require you to say, here's what I think I'm going to need this year, next year, the year after. And, the product team is going to do their best to forecast the utilization. It's never right. So you're either locked into a situation where you paid all this money for stuff you don't need and you underconsume, or you go into overages and now you're like paying list price because you rocketed through the ceiling of what you committed. Those are the hardest, I think, to get right in this market.
That's really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that. You're taking me back to days where I'm almost ready to break out in hives. Because I used to be the guy who had to sign the commitments for the telecommunications contracts and the burstable T1 to T3s and things like that. And it was like, yeah, I only want to pay for the T1, but I need the burstability to get to the T3. And they're like, okay, great. We'll sell you the fractional T3 at the T1. But if you go over the T1, by the way, your data center is in Boston and all these other people from around the world are going to be home running back to Boston. And they're praying that you go over that T1 and you burst over, right? On an average, and the average, I was like, oh, well, your monthly average went above this, and it was some bizarre algorithm that nobody could calculate. You needed a PhD in, abstract math from MIT in order to figure out how I went over my T1 on an average for the month. And then you got this biblical bill, right? I mean, it seems like that is exactly where we're at now, just in cloud storage. It's the old way of buying telecommunications bandwidth is now cloud IO and utilization of instances.
That's right. I mean, everything changes and everything stays the same, right? Like, what is the snowflake credit? I don't know. What's a 5-trend credit? That's what you're paying for, right? And it's like, how do you back that out from the utilization is extremely complex. And it's, in defense of the suppliers, it's not really their fault. This is very complex technology, right? Like figuring out how to forecast the utilization of your product is very difficult, but doing it right is so important, because if you're a MarTech tool that's querying a database, you're using Snowflake every time someone uses your product. So Snowflake is cost of goods sold. That means Snowflake is your gross margin, right? So how healthy your business is, and by the way, what matters the most when you want to raise right now in a down market economy, that's your gross margin, your efficiency, your profitability, right? So negotiating these contracts correctly is a fundamental difference in what your business is worth. That never used to be true, but right now it is. Like, you could be 30x your revenue and you could be 3x your revenue, and it might come down to how well negotiated your Snowflake bill is. It's totally crazy, but that's the way that it is right now.
Yeah, it's funny. I had this conversation with some guys that are running procurement this is totally down a rabbit hole, and I apologize. Guys are running procurement for like universities and colleges, and they're like, bro, our university is about to lose money because of the cost of chicken. And I'm like,
exactly.
What? And he's like, the amount of protein that we have to feed 50,000 undergrads is driving into the profit margin of the university, and we have to figure out the protein problem like now, or else we're going to have to raise tuition by some ungodly amount of money.
Exactly.
Because of the price of beef and chicken.
Yeah.
It's like
exactly.
Those two things and how they correlate is mind-boggling to me, but it adds the same. Musa says, go easy on marketing, Mike. I listen, bro. I hear you. I completely understand. The marketing industry put my kids through college while I was at Publicis Group. I love and have a warm place in my heart for marketing people. I'm just saying, the Lumascape, if you want to see a completely ridiculous, oversaturated SaaS world, look at the Lumascape, because there's hundreds and hundreds of companies that provide the same thing. MarTech is just completely off the reservation, I think. And hey, God bless them. Somebody's buying all that stuff, right? I mean, somebody's getting funding. So it's God bless them. All right, we're almost out of time. We got 10 minutes left, David. Let's talk a little bit about the future. So how do people like where is this all going is from your concern? I mean, we're kind of in the early stages of this still, right? It's blowing up. It's not slowing down. More and more thing is hyper-connected. I don't think we're going back to the days of perpetual licensing. I love the fact that you're in the SaaS space. I'm really interested in the organization. The people that are in the room right now, let's do this really quickly, because I just want everybody to know where they stand. In the room right now, in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being, oh my God, we're a complete mess and we're just holding on for dear life, And 5 is we're completely buttoned up in our SaaS portfolio. We're downstream, meaning we're managing our smaller spends. We've got a handle on how much risk there are associated with our SaaS related vendor population. Because that's another thing, right? You could be spending $10,000 with somebody, but if it's a financial planning and analysis tool that's dipping into your ERP system, that $5,000 product is one of the scariest products. It's a hand grenade sitting somewhere inside of your P&L, right? David, I mean,
That's
the
right.
other thing too is you gotta look at this thing three-dimensionally too. It's not just
It's not just cost.
Yeah. So why don't we dive into that for a second? So I'm really interested in how you guys attack that from a multidimensional perspective, because there's cost, there's time to market, there's risk associated with, hey, I'm about to buy this piece of software and they're a Series A and they don't make money yet, but my chief marketing officer loves it, right? I'm really interested in your thoughts on all of that and how you help advise and steer people through this traffic.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so we call these procurement preferences. And the first thing that we do when we sit down with you is we'll go through a questionnaire that lives in our system of like where you land on things. How important is cash flow right now? You know, multi-year versus not, marketing materials versus no marketing materials, maturity of business. We go through this whole exercise that lives forever in the process. So anytime a process gets spun up in the system, we know exactly where we are in terms of what matters to your organization and how to apply that to the decisions that we're making on your behalf as we negotiate. But I think that like the important thing with SaaS is to get everyone out of the mindset of cost as the key driver, to your point. Like if you're a financial institution, you know, InfoSec is number one, right? Like we'll design a process with you when we sit down and figure this stuff out. It's like, if you don't pass the sniff test on InfoSec, it's not worth spending 6 weeks in an RFP for you, right? It's not worth investing time in negotiating because you're never going to be able to sign this stuff, right? So I think it varies company by company, and it's really something that needs to be triangulated at the onset of any agreement. I can tell you right now, we have some customers who are like, we got to cut 30% no matter what. Like, we don't care. Like, get it out. Like, if it's not mission critical functionality, we're going to kill it. Like, help us find it. And we have other customers who say like, we're buying to prepare for, you know, the next 3 years because we expect that the recession might last that long. We don't want to cut too close to the bone because then we're going to have to build it all back up and it's going to be painful, right? So I think it's, you know, unfortunately the answer is it depends. We can guide you through that as a part of an assessment if you guys want, you know, as a call to action. We do free assessments. It's obviously a part of a sales process, which we're candid about, but you don't need to buy anything. We'll just take a look and we can show you where we think opportunities are to spend and where we see risk, or to save rather.
Yeah, that's a really, really tight rope walk, right? When you start cutting things down to the bone like that. My experience has been hell hath no fury like a sales department that you walked out the door a year ago and now you need to go buy it again. Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, they're gonna take 3 pounds of flesh. Yeah, because you walked some poor slob out the door a year ago and he lost his job. And the new guy knows, okay, I'm not taking that 60% reduction in cost like the last guy, because he might come back and cut me loose.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but we're really encouraging companies to think long-term, because right now, every single private companies, especially, everyone's board was like, you need to cut right now because we got to weather the storm. You don't want to raise money right now because you're not going to get a good valuation. And we've been telling everybody what you just said, which is like, yes, you can cut everything down to the bone, but this might be a 2-year recession, a 3-year recession. You're going to have to weather that, right? And that's going to come from actually implementing a forward-facing process that people will follow compliantly. If you cut vendors that you're going to need to go back to in 6 months, it's going to cost you more, way more than you save.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, Jeff Miller says 0 is the Wild Wild West. Jeff, thank you for being the only honest guy in the room. I appreciate that very much. Sanjay says we were a 1, now we're a 4. We're never going to get to a 5. I completely agree. I think I'm going to go back to my days at Gartner and the Gartner maturity model associated with technology sourcing and things like that. When it used to be the 5, 1 to 5 maturity model that everybody benchmarked themselves against, which was the old Gartner model about 100 years ago when I was actually doing this thing. And they used to say, if you can get to a 4, you've hit utopia. The cost of you getting to a 5 on a maturity level for technology sourcing and management is counterproductive to actually getting to the 5. And I tend to agree with that. It's the 80-20 rule. if you can get to this, and you can get to this either in the SaaS stack or in the tech stack as a whole, congratulations, do your victory lap, walk upstairs with the CIO hand in hand, tell everybody that the CIO is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then go find another stack in furniture, fixture, and assets, or I don't know, HR and benefits or something like that. Move on to, yeah, we're killing it in furniture now. David, quick, let me ask you this, we're almost out of time. All the things that we talked about today, right? What is the, well, let me ask you this, and then I'm going to ask you for your final thought. Is there a way for companies to dip their toe in the water with a company like you? Like, do they have to go, okay, here's my entire SaaS stack, let's go rock and roll? Or can they say, hey, I really want to look at MarTechs. I want to look at FinTech. I want to look at, you know what I mean? Like, how do they dip the toe in the water with you guys?
Yeah, we're very flexible there. Just we'll look at a list of vendors that you have together. We can cherry pick the ones that we have the most data on. Or we can focus on a subset of spend, right? So if it's, you know, a customer like a DocuSign, or, you know, somebody that has a pretty robust procurement function that has a spend threshold, the way that we got started in those cases is, you know, throw us some stuff that's going under the radar right now, so that you can start to get some savings on a subset of your spend that you're not currently influencing at all. We'll show you some success there. And then if you want to increase the volume, then you can. So there's two ways of going about it. We can look at it on the merits of the vendors. We can look at it on the merits of the spend, but we are pretty flexible. Most of our accounts grow over time. If you have a procurement team already, it's rare that, you know, you need coverage from us from 100% of your contracts. Sometimes, but not usually. So we're, you know, we design that with you.
Nice. Last question of the day from the audience. From, I think it's Shaitan. Is it possible to get the foreign exchange forecast CPI's minimum wage forecast through SaaS? I'll put my geopolitical economist hat on for a second and say there probably is. There probably is a way to read the tea leaves of the spend associated with the SaaS world in aggregate, especially in multiple geographies, and to extrapolate out what the foreign exchange is going to be, because people are spending money on either foreign entities are buying American-based organizations and what the foreign exchange looks like on that, or consumer price indexes based on aggregate spend of SaaS. I don't know that SaaS is probably enough, David. I'd ask you. I think it probably is getting close to being able to predict CPI indexes because of how much, you know, year over year SaaS is going up, which is probably tracking right along with CPI. Minimum
If
wage
not ahead.
forecast, if not ahead, it's probably ahead. Minimum wage forecast, I don't know if you can triangulate wage forecasts against SaaS, other than I think you could probably track capital raise and investment better than you could track minimum wage. That would be my guess. David?
Yeah, tough question. I actually don't know the answer to this question. My guess is possible. It's certainly not something that we can help with at the moment.
You're not a closet global economist?
Not just yet. I mean, theoretically, with the underlying data, you can get close on some of this stuff, but we're not currently seeing the right data points to model that right now with how we're collecting data at Tropic.
The closest thing I can tell you is take a look at the ISM PMI index. Maybe, I don't know, it's kind of sketchy. You heard it here first, and I apologize to everybody who works on that. All right, David, the 1 minute left. What's the one takeaway for the day? What do you think people need to leave here with that they need to know about you and about what they're trying to do solving their SaaS problems?
Yeah, I mean, I would say with very few exceptions, if you've never engaged a third party to look at your SaaS stack, there's going to be overspend in there, just because, you know, the network effect of seeing everything can't be replicated, right? So if I had one call to action for everybody, if you're interested in this, you want to know more about us, you want to know about what makes us special, whatever, we're happy to do an assessment that we do for free, where we can look at the vendors that you have and the spend that you have, sign an NDA, and show you where we see overspend relative to what we're seeing in the market. and also equip you with some tools for getting those rates down. You don't need to work with us to do it. The report is free. So that's something we can offer to anybody in Procurement Foundry. If that's something that you want to look into and just want to benchmark your stack, you can email me directly. I'm david@tropicapp.io, or you can email us broadly at info@tropicapp.io. Either way, we'll get in touch with you. So that if this is interesting, that's the best next step to take.
Yeah, my takeaway for the day is hyper-focused, specialized platform. Guys like David, I've said this before, I'll continue to say it. I'll say it probably from post-mortem. Spend money on gunslingers. Gunslingers are really good at what they do. They specialize in niches, they know, and you'd be shocked at how much they can save you when they know a very specific area of expertise and they bring all their effort to bear on that in one area. It sounds like David and his team are doing just that. I love the fact that you're getting into strategy and helping people beyond just cost and giving them alternatives in the marketplace. I think that's brilliant. And I didn't think of actually leveraging you for that, but that's really, really smart. And that's it, man. That's it. Keep an eye on this space. It's evolving quickly. And David and Tropic are a partner of Procurement Foundry. They're a sponsor of the community. You will see them in Las Vegas. You will see them on more content to come. David, thank you for sponsoring Procurement Foundry. We really appreciate it, man. You and a bunch of other folks help us keep the lights on, so we really appreciate it. I'll see. Yeah, Sanjay says I'll see you in Las Vegas. You're right, he will be there. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time today. And once again, David, thank you for the commitment to Procurement Foundry. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always good seeing you, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
All right, everyone. Have a great day. Take care. And if you need to ask David questions, find him on LinkedIn. He's great. He responds really quickly. His team's awesome at this. All right. Cheers. Bye-bye.